Welcome everyone to the Planning Commission meeting Thursday, July 18th, 2024. We're all here except for Commissioner Fassberg, the chair. So I'll chair this meeting. And first we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Fernitra, could you lead us in that?
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda, or anybody want any changes?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next is announcements and introductions. Dennis, do you want to start?
The only thing I can think of is that tonight, as we are sitting here, there are food trucks and music and fun in front of the City Hall. So if anybody's tuning in and they want to have a good time in the next couple of hours, come on down to the Commons Way, right near the entrance to the Commons, and it looks like they're having a good time.
And they can watch us later.
No comment.
Okay, Bob? Or any, Matt? No?
Nothing.
Okay, I don't have any either. Let's see, I don't have any cards, but is there anybody who wants to speak on an item that's not on the agenda? No? Okay. Then next we have the consent items, and there's a couple things in there. Is there a motion to approve that, or any comments or changes? Oh, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, page 5, the third word.
Commissioner, would you make sure your microphone's on and that you're speaking directly into it, please?
The third word is slightly. More precise word would be significantly.
Okay, which project is this one? I have to look again.
Well, it's the resolution.
Right, this is the resolution for, this concerns 22611 Federalist Road.
Yes.
And, this one is becoming, is it, why are you saying that? Because this becomes
Because it's
one of the
wrong.
largest homes in the,
It's wrong. It's materially wrong.
so it's going from 2,848 square feet to over 4,000, right?
This house
So, okay.
dwarfs 94% of the houses in the neighborhood.
Okay, so I think you're, I seem to remember that. This is at the very highest end or the highest. So can we change that? Is there any problem with changing that to significantly?
Maybe rather than putting a subjective word, it may be more appropriate to just say that the project is above the range of home sizes. So just delete slightly. That way the commission's not interjecting commentary into
Get
the
rid
finding.
of the adverb.
I
Just
think-
a matter of
I think
fact.
the volume is important. Since somebody put in slightly, they obviously had a distinct view that it was.
Commissioner Leah, I've got a compromise word.
Oh, good.
I have to accept it. Without hearing it coming from you, I know it'll be
I
good.
like the word substantially.
Okay, is that all right?
So,
Is
absolutely.
that all right with everybody?
Because it is.
It is
substantially greater.
Yeah, I agree. Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right, any other changes?
I have a comment.
Nope.
Pardon me?
Lawyer's got a comment.
Substantially it is subjective, and it's also a legal term in some senses that comes with a calculation. So I would agree with what Michael stated as a suggestion to just say the project is above the range, and that would be clean.
I think you
Except
need
that
to
it's
measure.
an understatement, I think, though. It's not, I'm not sure why that adverb is even there, but,
But that's the recommendation, because I think substantially, significantly, it still accomplishes the same thing, but that's the
Why
recommendation.
was slightly okay?
Well, I
It's
understand.
not. Just strike
It's
it.
not.
I
Take
understand
it out.
completely.
Yeah.
But that's just something to think about.
Here's one that may not be offensive. Materially.
Okay. I think showing the significance is important.
Okay.
I agree with you.
All right, so what word can we put in there? What does everybody want? What'd you say?
I said substantially.
Substantially is fine with me, materially is fine.
What do you want?
What
Commissioner
do you-
Leah?
Yeah, what do you prefer?
Substantially is fine.
Okay. All right, and nobody else has any changes of anything? So do I have a motion to approve with changing that word from slightly to substantially?
I'll move.
Is there a second? I'll second. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? No opposed, okay. All right. So we've approved, I hope we just approved both consent items with just that one minor change.
Yeah, I think we,
All right? So now we're going on to item number 3, which is a site plan review at 22534 Calapatria, or how do you pronounce it, Dennis?
Calipatria.
Calapatria. Does staff want to comment about this? Okay.
Yes, just briefly, Commissioners, good evening. Just to explain where we are since the last time this project was reviewed by the Commission. This project was reviewed on June 6, 2024, at which time the Commission recommended this project to be continued to the date certain meeting of July 18th, which would mean that packets for this meeting went out last week. Unfortunately, we were not able to get a complete revised set of plans from the applicant in time for packets to go out for this project, since the applicant is still working on the redesign of this item. We were expecting to have someone here on their end tonight to give a little bit more of an update to you, but at this time we don't have confirmation for when their plans will be ready. So essentially the Commission's options would be to continue this item to a future date certain, which would avoid public hearing notices being sent out for the project again, or if we continue to a date uncertain, that would mean that public hearing notices would be sent out for this project since the date would be undetermined at this time.
Okay. So I guess the question is, do we want to, and they haven't said what time they would be ready, right?
We met with them earlier this week. Our impression at that meeting was that they would know by today and that they would be able to be here to communicate to the Commission what they were working on and when they would be ready. So we were hoping to know at this time.
Oh, I get it. So, I mean, to me, I don't know what, we can hear from the other commissioners. I'd rather have everybody get notice. We did have people in the neighborhood, many people in the neighborhood come.
Well,
But
I'm going to move that we move this, or continue this to a date uncertain.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
second that.
All right. Any other discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so it's to a date uncertain. Okay. So that means everybody will get notice whenever that does come up, if it comes up again. All right. Now we have number 4, file number CUP 2023-002 for a beer and wine license at 23669 Calabasas Road, which is the former Subway location.
Yes.
Jacqueline?
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Let me just pull up this presentation.
And I have one card for this.
Yes. Okay, so first off, I want to mention that this project was noticed to all property owners within 500 feet of the subject site. The notice was also posted on the city's website, and it was also posted throughout the city at all required locations. And staff did not receive any public correspondence in response to this project. So here you can see an aerial view of the subject site. The site is located south of the 101 freeway, and it is at the intersection of Park Granada and Calabasas Road. The site is located in the commercial mixed-use zoning district and also within the scenic corridor overlay due to the proximity of the site to the 101 freeway. So in this slide, you can see a top-down view of the site. It's the courtyard at the Common Shopping Center, and the red arrow points to the location of the suite within the shopping center. So this photo shows the existing site as viewed from the parking lot looking north. So this tenant space is located next to Rosti, and the site was formerly occupied by the Subway restaurant. So as shown in the photo, you can see interior work has begun on the sushi restaurant. The new restaurant will be called Bonsai Sushi. Work on that restaurant is currently underway. Work initially had begun without permits on the site, but the applicant is currently working with the city's Building and Safety Division to ensure that all of the necessary permits and inspections are obtained for the space. So So the proposal before you tonight is a request for a conditional use permit to allow for the sale and on-site consumption of beer and wine at a new sushi restaurant, Bonsai Sushi. And Calabasas Municipal Code Section 17.62.060 requires conditional use permit requests to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. Here we have a site plan. You can see again, this is the courtyard at the Commons Shopping Center, and shown shaded in black here is the area of work. This is the site of Bonsai Sushi. The actual restaurant occupying the suite has already been approved under a separate zoning clearance, so the new restaurant is already approved to be in that space. This request is only for the alcohol sales at that restaurant alone. And again, it's 23669 Calabasas Road is the suite. Here you can see the proposed floor plan. It's color-coded, so you can see in purple we have the kitchen area. In this blue color here we have the bar area. In orange are the interior pathways within the space, and then in yellow we have the dining areas, and lastly in green the waiting area at the front. Alcohol sales will be limited to interior only, so there are no exterior changes and no exterior seating area proposed as part of this project. So alcohol sales will just be in this dining area and bar area only. The only related modification to this space regarding alcohol is an alcohol storage area that you can see in the back area of the kitchen on this floor plan. So the applicant has applied for a Type 41 license from the State Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, which authorizes the sale of beer and wine for consumption on or off the premises in conjunction with a restaurant. Alcohol sales in conjunction with a restaurant is an allowed use pursuant to Section 17.12.035 subsection B of the Calabasas Municipal Code. The proposed restaurant will operate from 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. midnight, and proposed alcohol sales will be limited to those same hours. And on-site consumption of alcohol will be limited to the interior areas of the restaurant only. The project was also routed to members of the city's Development Review Committee as part of our review of the conditional use permit application, and our DRC includes the Sheriff's Department. So the Sheriff's Department expressed that they did not have any concerns regarding granting of the requested CUP. Listed here are the 4 required findings for a conditional use permit per section 17.62.060 of the Calabasas Municipal Code. The applicant's proposed findings for a conditional use permit are included in your packets as Exhibit B. Staff concludes that the proposed project will not alter the existing restaurant/shopping center use of the subject site, which is an allowed use in the commercial mixed-use zoning district. Compliance with applicable municipal code standards is documented within the written staff report, and the proposed project is exempt from CEQA review pursuant to Section 15061, subsection B3, general rule exemption, and section 15301, existing facilities of the California CEQA guidelines. So with that, staff recommends that the commission direct staff to prepare a resolution for approval or a resolution for denial of file number CUP-2023-002, inclusive of all required findings to support the resolution. And staff is prepared to assist the commission in developing findings for approval or denial as required. Thank you. I'm available for questions, and we also have the applicant in the audience tonight as well.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Does anybody have questions for staff, first of all? No? Does anybody have questions for the applicant? Because I have a card from Mr. Hodayeki. Do you want to come up and speak anyway, or you just, you want to?
Questions, I'll be more than willing to answer them. If there's any questions, I'll be more than
Oh,
willing to
okay.
answer.
It's rather inconsequential, but I'm curious. Does wine includes hot sake? Is that rice wine?
Yes, sir.
There you go.
That's the reason.
I'll see you at Bonsai.
I guess this is for staff, well, either one. The only question I have is I've seen the name spelled differently in the documents.
Yes, why don't you tell us, Mr. Hodayeki, where you live?
How the name of the restaurant will be spelled. The way that it's spelled, if it helps in the documents filed with the state for ABC for the license, is the way that I have it in the staff report, I believe, which is BONZI.
Correct.
Right, and the plans have 2 other spellings.
I
Michael,
apologize
you wanted
about
to
that.
get identification from him?
I would have to
yeah.
speak to the architect why they made that mistake. Maybe they were just writing bonsai the way it was. But we'll rectify that if you like.
All right, well, first of all, could you state your name and the place, the
Kurosh
city that you live?
Kodiaki, applicant for Bonsai Restaurant.
And you live in Hidden Hills?
Hidden Hills,
Right.
5949 Clear Road.
Okay. We don't need the address, but
No.
just the city. That's okay, thank you. So the name is BONZI?
ZI.
Yeah, I don't think you need to change anything on unless it's a formal document, but you don't need to change the,
No, that's what was
Otherwise.
registered with ABC, BONCI.
perfect.
And
that's
that
what
will
we
be the
gave
name
to
of the
city.
restaurant, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is it any relation to the old Bonsai,
It was-
B-A-N-Z-A-I sushi?
It was just, we met the chef, and everybody in Calabasas had good memories from the original bonsai of 25 years ago.
Right.
When I met with Yuji, and he recommended that we, and he gave us his blessing that we can use his name. So we decided to go that, and he's actually mentoring us as one of the master chefs looking over our grand opening.
Oh. You have to let Commissioner Hussaina know when that will be.
Definitely,
Uh,
definitely.
All right. Do we have any, what?
I was just saying, I love sushi.
Oh,
Me too.
okay. Any questions? You have questions?
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that we recommend, or ask the staff to prepare a resolution for approval of this project.
Second.
Yeah, I would just comment that this is one of the few times where I've seen the findings so well prepared, they could almost be adopted tonight.
Thank you so much.
Somebody
We've
had a
lot
good,
of
somebody
help
had a
from
good
city.
template, because this is really well done. But to the extent that you do use these findings, note that there's a comment on paragraph 4 about the existing site is currently operated as a restaurant facility. It's not currently operated, is it?
It's in process.
Okay.
It had been a restaurant
Yes, I know,
previously.
it used to be the old Subway.
We c- when we write it, we'll
So
But-
just
but otherwise,
change the tense or something.
Whoever did these, I thought did a great job.
Does our staff do these, or who
Often
prepares
the
the?
applicant
Your
does.
staff.
Our staff.
No,
did great.
the findings were you.
Jacqueline's been unbelievable in helping us through this. It's been wonderful.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
some people pay closer attention than others. And they did a great job.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you there.
Mr. Kodayeki,
Thank
and
Good
good luck.
luck. Good luck and hurry.
Thank you. And thanks for coming tonight. Next is number 5. It's an update to section 17.30, signs of the Calabasas Municipal Code. And I don't know who's taking this.
Well, I'll start off with just a brief introduction, then hand it over to Tom. First off, this is just a discussion item. There was no public hearing notice. This is not a public hearing, and what's in front of the commission is a draft for discussion purposes. And then, based on the direction tonight, we would prepare a formal draft ordinance and do a public hearing notice. This particular request or proposed draft ordinance came at the request of the city council. Back, I believe, in April, the council requested that a future agenda item be brought forward. The idea was to permit and allow some sort of digital kiosk, digital signage at within large shopping centers. But part of that component would also include security cameras that would also have a feed into the sheriff's station. This is somewhat born from one of the city's strategic priorities, which is to increase public safety throughout the community. And so that was the genesis of this future agenda item request. In June, as documented in the staff report, staff had this discussion at the council to get better direction, and the direction was to proceed with drafting an ordinance and running it or having it go through the process, which of course would include the Planning Commission's review and recommendation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Members of the commission, this is a discussion item, and I know that in most instances, when we're discussing something, we don't roll out in front of the commission a draft ordinance, so that's a little different this time. But we thought it would help crystallize some of the discussion to actually have a working draft. So please try to think of it as that. Anything in there is able to be red inked and changed however you want it. So we're hoping for some good exchange among yourselves as to whether some of these, at least starting points for some of the standards are sensible or you're not sensible, so we're just looking for your input. So I'm going to walk you through that quickly, and then it'll be an open floor for the vice chair to lead a discussion. Okay? So as Michael pointed out, it was the council's direction that we're pursuing this, and so we know it's intended to lead to an ordinance. So again, we thought we'll just jump right in and start drafting one. And the importance of it is the security aspect. That's what makes this truly unique and a little bit different than what would normally be pursued as a sign ordinance amendment. It will improve safety to be able to accommodate something like this. I know it's easy to say, well, there are already security cameras that individual businesses have within their shops at their entrances. But the point behind this is you get them out where the public realm is and where the visitors are walking, coming and going from their vehicles, and that sort of thing. And you have the opportunity to be able to get something as a direct feed that can be used by law enforcement. So in terms of regulation, like so many other things, you're going to have to start figuring out, well, how many of these can we really have, should have, want to have, what will do the job, and then where can you place them, how big can they be, should the displays be regulated in and of themselves for some reason, and then how and whether there'd be controls for noise, that sort of thing. So those are the parameters we would be looking for in an ordinance that would regulate digital kiosks. So we already have a definition of a kiosk, and we already have regulations in our sign code for kiosk, just plain kiosk. And this is the definition within our code today for a kiosk: a freestanding structure erected on a foundation and designed to provide advertising space for a group of buildings in a shopping center addressing a pedestrian audience. And if you think about the kiosks that are at the commons that we see day to day, that's exactly what this is, right? So what makes a digital kiosk different? Well, here's a definition we could put, and right now it's in the draft ordinance as we've written it. It is a kiosk which, in addition to exhibiting the standard characteristics of a kiosk, incorporates one or more digital display screens to convey information visually to passersby. So instead of a static display, it's now got a dynamic display, one that changes, one that is illuminated. So it gets us to issues of then, okay, so as we look at digital kiosks separate from regular kiosks, we need to decide, well, how many? Should they be something you might want to allow at all shopping centers regardless of size, that sort of thing? So as a point of departure, right now, that draft ordinance, that's the attachment to the written report, sets a floor of 30,000 square feet in terms of whether a digital kiosk would be there or not. That's, like I said, you think that's too high? Let us know. Think it's too low? Let us know. Let's try to figure out a reason. Our draft shows maximum of one per 12,000 square feet, so that tells you how many per complex. I'm sorry, I forgot to do the page down. So I'll give you an example in a minute, and then there'd be a separation, and right now we're showing 75 feet as a separation minimum between individual kiosks. So if we go to the next slide here, these are the shopping centers in the city. So if we reflect back on the slide I was just on, 30,000 square feet being a baseline or a floor threshold for when you'd be qualified. The fourth, it's starting at the bottom, but the smallest, you move up to the fourth one there, which is Las Virgenes Village. That one is over 30,000, 30,000 square feet. So they would qualify for at least one kiosk. But of course, you can have one every 12,000, so that means they'd be able to have up to three. It's up to them. It's a type of ordinance that would be permissive, not mandatory. So somebody could come to us with an application for one or two or three for a center that is 39,000 square feet. But if you had a center that's less than 30 you don't even qualify for one. That's the way the draft is written now. Doesn't mean it has to be that way. You could set that anything over 11,500 at least gets one. And then you've allowed every center in the city to have at least one. So that would be something else you might want to consider. That would be the most permissive, right? That would get the most security cameras in the most locations, arguably. So there's one set of parameters to keep in mind. Then you've got how high should they be, how tall, how wide. We have some really capable staff here. They know how to use measuring tape. I have photographic evidence on this slide. So right now, we've set a mark on the wall, literally and figuratively of sorts, of 6 feet for width and 12 feet for height. Now, how does that compare with what you would see at the Commons, for example? The Commons, I believe, are close to 11 feet, the ones that you see there today, and approximately 5 feet across. We increased it to approximately 6 because you've got to be able to accommodate the digital displays and the electronics that go with it. So in a frame, the structure around it. So it seemed to make sense that you might want to have something a little wider. The displays are going to have to be a flat screen. You're not going to be able to do a cylinder type thing like this necessarily, at least where the screens would be. So we thought we'd start at something just a tad larger than what you see today. But that was where that came from, basically. We have a provision in that draft ordinance, and we do this for temporary use permits too, by the way. We always have a standard provision that something like this cannot be placed in a way that it would impede emergency egress or access, and as well as access for the disabled. So that's a fundamental. Now we can show you an example based on those kind of parameters. So here happens to be the Malibu Canyon Shopping Center, where the Jack in the Box is located at the front. This is on the southwest corner of Las Virgenes Road and Agora Road. Everybody got their bearings here? So let's see if I can get this over to the other screen. There we go. So there's the Jack in the Box right there. And what's shown here is the green outline is the property. The blue line shows an approximate 25-foot setback. So one of the parameters in the draft ordinance is a setback along street-facing property lines of 25 feet. So it wouldn't have anything near the public right-of-way. That could be greater if the commission thinks that should be something greater. There's also a provision in the draft that these kiosks shall be inward facing, if you will, to the pedestrian and not to driving rights of way, private or public. The idea is for them to be oriented to the pedestrian traffic and not the vehicular traffic, so as to not be distracting. So we've shown here an example for this center. This one happens to be, let's see, where did it line up? Which one was it? Malibu Canyon is 42,596 square feet. So the way the draft is written right now, that would they qualify because it's 30,000 square foot threshold. They're above that. And you divide 12,000 of that, they'd be able to have 3 kiosks. So what we show here is 3. And we're showing them with some spacing that at least meets, I can get this mouse to work. There we go. Sometimes not. But you can see that they're more than 75 feet from one to the other. The spacing parameter has principally a goal to spread them out so you can improve coverage. And you don't want it so spread out that it becomes the limitation for how many you can do at a center. So if, for example, the spacing might have been 200 feet, even though they would have qualified for 3 based on square footage, you couldn't have done 3 with 200-foot spacing requirement. So we've tried to come up with something that allows enough flexibility within the number they can have for a center that they could place them where it's going to make sense. They're not going to impede necessary egress and those sorts of things, and still get them spread across the center. Now remember, this is permissive. This is something they could decide they want to do. It's up to them. But we want to make sure in terms of the regulations, it meets the city's objective, which is to improve security out there. So these would have display, so unlike a regular sign, we want to have consider some limitations on how things are displayed. What would be the aggregate area? Should that be limited? Just like signs, regular signs have an area limit and they'll have a size limit in terms of height, width, that sort of thing, independent of one another. The sign copy itself is going to be limited on its amount of space. So we'll do the same thing for the display on these. We're suggesting that you might consider something that would be, I'll call it design focused, where you would require the screens to be framed rather than just a screen on a stand, so that you create something that can have a little bit of panache, if you will. It doesn't have to be just a digital monitor on end. And so that's a start on that discussion. We are suggesting that you limit the hours so that you've got illuminated digital displays, not carrying on at 1 a.m, flashing, whatever. That they'd be basically operating the same time you would expect businesses to be operating in the complex. We're suggesting that audio would be prohibited. If you can imagine video and audio at a number of these along a pedestrian way along a shopping center, that could be have its own problems in terms of noise. Light intensity, we're suggesting not be above 3-foot candles. This is basically a standard that would be consistent with our dark skies ordinance in terms of keeping lighting levels low. Not necessarily I've looked at the ordinance that says this is exactly what it says, because it doesn't address these kinds of screens, but we believe it should be limited so they're not excessively bright. This is something we checked in with Glenn, our senior planner, who is our expert on lighting. He's our lead AP guy, and lighting is one of the things he's worked on his whole career here, and he thinks that 3-foot candles is a good point of departure for that. And in terms of review and approval, the way it's written up now is that it would be a sign permit, as with any other sign. It would not be a sign program amendment, so even if a center has a sign program, and most of them do, we would not require them to amend their sign program. This would be just its own permit. But if they have a sign program, we are going to require them to, as part of their sign permit review, that we can determine that it's consistent with the sign program. So if they have a sign program that, let's see here, if it had a certain architectural or design style to it, we'd expect that the kiosk is going to at least reflect that to some degree, not be completely different than what is in their program. Also would not need a scenic corridor permit. Now, that's mostly because we already wrote it in there. You cannot put these in a place you can see them from the scenic corridor, from a public way. So you don't need a scenic corridor permit because you can't see them anyway. They're going to be in the interiors in the pedestrian ways of a shopping center. Now, because we're talking about amending a chapter of the code, under our code, digital kiosks with security cameras enlarging shopping centers would require a code amendment that this commission must review first and make a recommendation to the city council. So the next time we come to this commission, the intent is to have a draft ordinance that reflects the input of the commission. And that would be a draft ordinance for your consideration as a recommendation to council. And that brings us to turning the baton over to you all so that we can have a discussion and hear your ideas on some of this so that we can fully bake this as a draft.
Thank you very much, Tom. You put a lot of work into this. I think we all have a number of questions, I imagine, so who wants to start with questions?
Well, let me start. I'm just curious, what was the impetus? What triggered the council's desire to look into this? Was it a security issue? Was it the property owners coming to the city saying we want this?
Yes, I mean, it's a security issue. I don't think, if any of us have been following the news, not just local, but across the country, there is a crime element that we didn't really have to face when the Commons was approved, or any of our shopping centers for that matter. And this is a way to help address that. And it's something that, while meeting the council's intent and for the benefit of the community, it can be accomplished at no cost to the city. Because the individual property owners would be incentivized to do this, which, by the way, is another reason why, to make the standards substantially more restrictive than regular kiosks, it kind of might defeat the purpose. We want to incentivize them to be able to use it, and if you put yourself in the shoes of a property owner, you'll be able to get revenue from advertisers, and that will pay for the cost of having the security cameras installed and monitored and all of that. So the idea is it's a public safety benefit at no cost to the city itself, other than processing a code amendment, basically, and then individual sign permits as necessary for any owners that would elect to take advantage of this. So that's exactly where it comes from.
But could I just follow up on that, because I need more information. The property owners get the revenue. How does it get to the sheriff?
The sheriff doesn't get the money. They get the surveillance.
But who pays for the sheriff? The city pays for the sheriff. So
The city's paying for a sheriff that doesn't have this tool available to them now. Will pay for the sheriff, but they'll have a better tool.
And if I may, there's a significant cost to be able to provide a live feed from a landlord's property to the sheriff. So in order to provide, I mean, and I think recently the sheriff set up a whole station or a whole substation that has security cameras and stuff like that. But there's a cost to doing that, and either the city can pay that cost throughout the city at different locations. This was just one way to be able to get better eyes on private property.
But can we have some of the revenue pay for the sheriff for this? Because the sheriff will charge eventually. They're monitoring all these centers.
The council would be considering that. Any form of revenue sharing, if you will, and how the city might be able to have funds that would help pay for that cost. Is going to be up to the council to consider. But for
you'll
this
come
commission,
back. Well, I'm just asking questions. So you'll come back anyway with that, and we can talk about it then, whether we want the cost to be paid by the property owner or the city.
Well,
it seems like
there's
the city's short of money anyway, so I don't know why they would.
Hold on, there's no, if I may interrupt, there's no additional cost to the city for the security, for the feed. That setup already exists, but there is a cost to be able to connect any given security camera to the sheriff station and then maintain that feed. But
Well, there has to be a cost that they're charging us to monitor the feeds.
no, they're not charging it's part of the city's contract.
But then it's part of the contract, and that will go up because of this. So I mean, like Calabasas Lake has monitoring of its lake, and they pay for it. They have cameras, and it costs money. So this isn't free, and somebody's going to be paying for it, whether it's the city or the property owners. We can talk about it, but that's what I'm following up about.
Right, and our recommendation is that under Title 17, it should be limited to the specific regulations. If this moves forward, then the council could discuss the financial component of whether or not there should be revenue sharing, or if there's a cost to the city to monitor that feed.
Well,
And it may be the case that
right.
they will be paying that, and so that just goes into the additional advertisement component.
Right. I mean, we don't have any of that information. So anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry, Matt. Go ahead. Just following up on your question.
No, thank you. So before we get into the spacing, because I'm sure we want to talk about the spacing, I'm curious about the aesthetics of the kiosk. You know, we're going to have to say goodbye to the cylindrical kiosks at the Commons. And before we set guidelines, do we have examples of kiosks that are affordable, or sorry, digital kiosks that are affordable to these property owners, so we don't set guidelines that are just unattainable and impossible for the property owners? I saw one example. I'm not too hot on that example, frankly. It's very bare bones, but it is what it is. So, I guess I can Google myself and see what's available before we set those guidelines or recommendations. Just examples.
It is, our understanding is that digital kiosks are fairly specialized. It's not a common off-the-shelf product. So whether it is shopping center A or shopping center B, they're likely going to have to hire a company and have it specifically built. Now, there are cheaper versions, and like you said, we may not want to go that far lenient. So our recommendation is to have something that does require them to put thought into the design so that it matches the center and an existing sign program from an architectural standpoint. For reference, I do believe that Caruso has other properties that they have some form of digital signage. I'm not sure which ones, but I'm not sure if the other shopping owners do, though. So you would be able to find a couple examples from that.
Yeah, we'll be happy to look for examples. I did look for a bunch myself through the good old internet, but I think for us to reach out to Caruso would be a good way to get some specific examples that they probably can get their hands on quickly.
Oh, thank you. Bob, questions?
Yeah, let's start with the simple fact. The feed. The feed, I assume it has to be wireless.
You're talking about the feed to the sheriff?
To the sheriff.
I'm not sure whether, I don't think it'd be wireless, but I mean, if somebody did one of these kiosks, they'd have to put electrical in. It's
Well,
not
if
going to
you
be
get the
overhead
feed
electrical,
from the
of course it's going to be.
kiosk to the sheriff, it has to be wireless. If it's wired, it's not going to work. I mean, you'd have wires all over the city like spider webs.
Well, let me,
I'm,
There are many technological ways of accomplishing that, but we did not define what that requirement is, at least in the draft that's in front of the commission. So the requirement is that there's a feed. How they make that feed occur, that's between them and the sheriff department.
Maybe it's by internet, but we don't know.
Yeah, it could be wired, because the wire could go to something that then sends it through a secured internet feed to the sheriff station. I don't know, but it's not I would doubt it's a physical direct line to the sheriff
No, I
station.
would doubt it can't be a physical direct line. It has to be wireless at some point to go to the sheriff's department. Has the sheriff been consulted, and are they capable of getting feeds from how many different kiosks?
They have not been consulted by our department, but they have been consulted by the city manager's department, to my knowledge, and they are capable of accepting feeds.
Okay.
I don't know what that number is, that we haven't had that level of conversation.
And I assume these feeds are going to be real time.
Yes.
Okay, then why shut it off at 10 o'clock?
Well, the digital sign would be shut off at 10 o'clock. We're not saying that a security feed has to be shut off at 10.
the security
But
feed
how
would be
can they take a
24/7.
picture if it's shut off, if it's powered down?
We're just saying that the actual sign that is illuminated would be shut off outside of the hours that's in the proposed ordinance or the draft ordinance. That does not mean that they have to turn off a security camera. They can keep that running 24/7.
We would require them to have it running
Sorry?
24/7. The security cameras are to be on all the time.
Okay, they need light to be seen. They
No, there's security cameras today have pretty advanced technology. They can see, they have night vision.
They do, but they become more costly.
And the shopping centers are not entirely pitch black either. They have some security lighting around them as well.
Okay, so it's going to be a real-time feed. We've established that that's what you want, a real-time feed. And the purpose is security. Now, if someone is going to apply for a kiosk, I assume they must have the feed?
If somebody's going to apply for digital kiosk permits,
Yes,
they don't get a permit for one without the cameras.
Okay, they
and without the fee. They have to do this type, and it would have to be confirmed that that's what it's doing.
If we're going to limit the kiosks to larger shopping centers, are we setting the city up for liability from those businesses that are not in larger centers?
Good
I think
question.
it's something to be considered.
I don't know if the city would be liable, that's, Vernita could get to that, but I did point out earlier in my presentation that there's an option of where you set the bottom of this, the floor, and you could decide that 10,000 square feet and above, they should have at least one, or have the ability to have at least one, and if you do that, you've covered every shopping center in the city so that they can have at least one. And then you're certainly accomplishing a fundamental objective, which is to be able to have these everywhere that you reasonably would want one.
All right, one last question.
Well, hold on, before we move on, I will point out when this was discussed at the council on June 19th, they were clear that they only wanted this to apply to larger shopping centers. So that's why we put the 30,000 square foot threshold in as that number. I would be cautious of going too low because it may open up the shopping centers that they did not have in mind. Again, this is a recommendation from the commission, so if the commission felt strongly, then they could make that recommendation, say that, you know, we believe that it should be set at this number instead.
I was just raising the issue that there might be exposure, and it's something that should be considered. If certain businesses are precluded from having this opportunity, especially that the businesses are paying for it.
I don't believe that it would put the city at any exposure risk. They could still have security cameras. It's just not this particular type of security device. The other, I think, reason why we want to be careful of the size of the shopping center is, and I know we have provisions in there that it can't be visible from the street, but the smaller the shopping center gets, the harder it is to be able to install a sign like this without having exposure to the street, without impeding pedestrian walkways, et cetera. So there is a balance to be had here.
Okay, last question from me. As I read the documentation, these kiosks are going to be facing forward, not the doors, not the stores. So, I mean, it seems to be counterproductive if,
Wait, which door? I thought they were facing perpendicular to the,
well, not going to be facing the store, they're going to be looking out.
maybe you can explain then which way they face.
Well, they're intended to face pedestrian traffic, and typically when you're orienting signs to pedestrian traffic in a shopping center, that means they're facing the left and right, if you will. If you're looking at the shopping center, they're facing left and right, not at you.
Yeah, but they're not watching the doors is what I interpreted. And
Well, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about the monitors that have the advertising. If you're talking about the cameras.
Cameras, yes.
The camera placement and direction is going to be up to what the property owner and working with their tenants are going, and law enforcement are going to believe is the best. We're not going to get into that as part of this regulation.
Okay.
Bob,
I'm done.
I wanted to just be clear on what you were stating about liability. Are you saying that businesses, it'll bring liability to the city for discrimination because
Yes.
one business?
Yes.
Okay.
Dennis, do you want to, it looks like you
I
have,
have a lot of things, but go ahead. You guys first.
oh, then John, questions?
Thank you. I'm interested in a little bit in the content. So I'm trying to understand how these work. This is, I know what a kiosk is, and I think I know what the word digital means. Are we talking about changing advertisement on a screen that every few seconds it's a new product or a new store? Is that the idea, as opposed to a stationary like we have at the Commons now?
It could be moving, right? It could be, for example, what we see on the screens here. There would be a static image, right? That image is not changing, but in any given moment, it could change to some other static image, like a screensaver often does, right? So it would include those, but the way it's written right now, it include video as well, so it could be an actual loop of something, a fountain or whatever you might have.
But it could
A
be a
walk,
loop.
a walk along a cobblestone street for 10
Like-
seconds. You
like
might,
a commercial.
you might see something
Okay.
video-wise, but no audio.
Right, but it could be true advertising products sold by the stores within that shopping center.
That's right. It
And
could
we
also
could-
automobiles. automobiles.
Okay, and who decides the content?
Well, I tell you one thing, we don't.
Yeah. Well, but we regulate we regulate because I don't want to be involved in anything where we're going to have kiosks all over the city of Calabasas flashing advertisement for popsicles and Birkenstocks or whatever they're selling in the shopping center. I mean, I think this is a very concerning subject to me. I mean, I see way too many people spend their whole lives on phones or looking up at Times Square type, advertisement and buzzes and whistles. And that's not, to me, the sense of Calabasas.
Downtown Tokyo.
I think, and
Las
setting,
Vegas.
setting expectations, we cannot control that content. So we could set the parameters of size, height, location, setbacks, et cetera. And we can even control how large that digital piece is, but we cannot set any stipulation or parameter on what's in that piece.
I suppose we could set rules as to how bright
Yes,
the screen is.
Yeah.
Yep.
as long as the
Maybe
rule is
how-
content neutral.
Well, okay.
We cannot control the content, so they could advertise things that don't relate to that center? It's just a
Yes.
revenue source for the,
They could advertise cars that aren't in that center.
It's First Amendment.
oh, I don't like that.
I'm concerned about that too.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
So,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Okay.
And then again, this has to be a flat screen and not a round.
Well, it could be. I
product.
mean,
I don't know, I've never seen
don't
one.
see a lot of round ones, but they exist, concave for sure, but it seems like a design that we should anticipate would be designs that accommodate flat screens. That doesn't mean the kiosk has to be flat by any means. You could easily install flat screens on the kiosks,
I think-
modify the kiosks, what I should say, that exist right now in the commons to accommodate flat screens. You
I
would
think that-
inset them to make it look good. I wouldn't have them mounted on a outboard, but I'm sure there's a way to do it. But by setting standards where we're going to limit what, for example, what percentage of a kiosk is digital display and keeping that pared down and to have a design parameter as well, that helps us prevent it looking like Times Square.
Right now, we don't have a problem with non-digital kiosks in shopping centers. We have them in the commons. We could have them in the courtyard across the street.
You can have them now.
And so those non-digital kiosks could have cameras and take care of the security problem that we're concerned about. I'm a little bit worried that the tail is wagging the dog here, that the real problem is, or the real issue of concern is security. And so now and I think it's a clever idea to sort of get someone else to fund all this. I may get that. But I'm very worried about the aesthetic cost to end up with the goal that we're really trying to achieve, which I happen to agree with, which is better security cameras throughout the shopping centers, 24/7, as you said, Tom. And so to get the security benefit, we're going to establish a potential device that would, if there's enough market interest, be in all shopping centers above X, going at least during business hours, flashing lights and changing quickly and advertising whatever someone wants to advertise, provided it's within an appropriate LED and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I'm just sort of a Cassandra here, but I'm troubled. I'm troubled to sit here and try to decide whether 30,000 is the right number or 10,000 is the right number when I have a fundamental concern about the concept. Is that making myself clear?
Sure, and Cassandra was right.
Okay.
Oh, no, definitely. Do you have any other questions? Or?
I did wonder, just on a technical thing on the ordinance, there was something about pedestrian scale, And then I saw that you're sort of suggesting or recommending potentially 12 feet. I mean, 12 feet's bigger than a basketball hoop. That's pretty tall to me. And again, if it's that tall and the content goes 12 feet high and it's flashing, hamburgers or whatever, that gets kind of Times Square-ish to me. So that seems to me, I think that's too tall, but I could be convinced otherwise. One little nitpick on page 5 of 30 of the working draft,
Yeah.
under paragraph E at the bottom of that page, there's a reference to, in order to provide flexibility in sign design, the commission and/or director shall have the authority, blah, blah, blah. First of all, is that commission the planning commission?
What page are you on, please?
5 of 30
Yeah.
of the working draft.
On the bottom.
At the bottom, paragraph E, as in elephant. And there's a reference to the commission and/or director has certain power.
Yes.
And that's the planning commission? Is that defined somewhere? That commission is the planning commission? I didn't see
Yeah.
it, but I
Where,
can't-
where the
It
commission.
is in Title 17, any reference to the commission is the planning
It is the planning
commission.
commission.
It is the plan.
But also, that particular section was not modified. So
Yeah.
the only modification that was made is the underline.
Oh, but what I'm wondering is, does our power to modify also relate to digital kiosks?
Yes.
It would. So someone comes and says, we want to, because of our unique circumstance, we want to increase our digital kiosk to 15 feet, if it's within this percentage, and I didn't work out the percentages, then that could go to the director and/or to the commission to get involved in digital kiosk modifications?
I actually would say in this particular case, no, because that's related specifically to the sign program.
Okay, that's what I was really wondering.
And since these are proposed to be issued separately from the sign program, although they have to follow the parameters of the sign program, if it exceeds the hard numbers that are in the draft ordinance, that would then be a variance request.
Well,
That would come to
okay,
commission.
and I'm not saying we shouldn't be involved, I just wasn't clear.
Yeah.
But there ought to be some provision for when someone does want to change a digital kiosk. Who approves it? Does the planning commission get to see that as a director decision? This is a whole brand-new thing, so there's
Yeah.
going to be some changes.
I would say it's a variance. Again, if it's a request to modify a numerical standard, right, the distance between kiosks, the setback from the
Setbacks.
street,
Well,
that could be processed as a variance with the sign permit.
I know you think that, and I don't disagree with you, but let's make it clear in the documents. Well, I think that's really about kind of all I had right now.
Well, we can come back.
Yeah.
Dennis, do you want me to go, or do you want to begin?
Well, may I at least make a general observation?
Sure.
And then I know that I'm going to have to turn my stuff in because I have so much to say, and I don't want to delay us, but let me just make several key points.
We have time.
Well, we do, but I hark back to all the difficulty that the several of us had in just dealing with story polls. And what they wanted and what we thought they were telling us they wanted, and not just one of the developers, all of the developers in town. And that's before we get to the folks that most folks like the Commons and like the Summit and so forth. So if you look at the history of our city, a lot of interesting things happened here. When we incorporated, we had what were called in the industry 40-foot display boards or billboards. Some of them were lighted, some were not, but they would change monthly or whenever someone decided they wanted to change the content. And the county permitted those signs even after we were incorporated, and should have been able to at least express an opinion. Well, the county was making $10,000 a month on the facings of those billboards, and we had one right in front of the Cadillac dealership, we had one that was right here at the car wash and gas station. We had one that was, it took us 2 decades, in fact, almost 3 decades to get rid of the one that was nailed to a tree, an oak tree, at the intersection of Las Virgenes and the 101 freeway. And luckily, it burned down in the Woolsey fire. And because they had to come to us at least to express our opinion, I know I'm going on a tangent, but that was a big deal. Agoura Hills has spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars trying to retire the billboards that they felt, county didn't, but they felt that it was polluting their lifestyle. So they actually created a significant budgetary fund in order to, over a period of 10 or 20 years, retire those billboards. Guess what? We didn't have to pay a nickel here. And that's because we played our cards right. But that was 30 odd years ago. And everybody's tightened up all their schedules and everything else. So I want to commend the staff, number one, because this thing is a nightmare, and you've made it coherent enough for us to be able to say, I'm concerned about what's the camera angle, and how high is the camera, and the kiosks that we have can be made to rotate. I mean, there's a million things that we could deal with, and we already have this ordinance in place that regulates stuff that we knew about maybe 20 years ago. I don't know what the date of the original 17.30 signage code permit for digital kiosks with security cameras and so forth. And we're asking the right questions, and that is, and the staff will investigate all this stuff. The motivation is to get somebody else to pay for the surveillance cameras that we think we need in our places of public gathering, whether they're shopping or otherwise. And this is a clever way to do it, and that is to say, let's open up Pandora's box and let's make sure that Gen C2, who invited us to send all of our camera feeds from our Ring doorbells to our security light cameras and everything else, because you can right now hook up to the LA County Sheriff's Department at Lost Hills. There is a person that's monitoring whatever video feed they get there. And we've had presentations, in fact, by Commander or Captain C2, to the audiences here in the city. And our people, you guys, have paid a lot of attention, and you've drawn from those initial perspectives on how this kind of thing is going to evolve, because it is happening so fast. And I have about 20 pages, 20 things that are meaningful that I'd love to have you guys give us an opinion on how it affects our future in order to get some camera feed in order to deal with basically a Crime Stopper issue. Primitive approach is being done as we speak at Trader Joe's. They say, shopping, ? So are the thieves. Hold on to your purse and your wallet, right? And almost every week there's a report in the Acorn or one of the papers about somebody losing a purse or the keys or even a car or two in that facility, where it would be great to have surveillance cameras. How to do it in that very complex set of circumstances is what you guys are working on. Thank you very much for doing it. But if we're doing this in order to give cover to the folks who have a great idea at the council, which is to improve the security and deal with the issues of privacy and surveillance and mischief and vandalism and technological change. I mean, in 6 months' time, anything we would install now will be obsolete. That's the way the world's working. And we haven't even started to factor in artificial intelligence, and everybody's playing in that game, and hacking. And how about the old spray can? Just come along and spray the lens on all these security cameras, but it doesn't stop the advertising. So we're asking you guys to help us have a decent discussion about what we're going to do to deal with the future of advertising in the various gathering places, not just the malls, and not just the big ones, which we can, and you have given us a template under which we can deal with the complexity that we're facing. But I don't think we can give you direction tonight that is adequate for you to say, hey, the planning commission thought this. You guys go figure out whether you're going to get, Captain C to her feed, which she has, done a great job, in fact, in getting the county sheriff to underwrite. Her station is the only station in all of LA County that's got a monitoring station that is approved to actually be set up, manned, and take input from this community. So it's such an immediate thing that I don't even know how to start being critical other than to write down everything that occurs to me. And I'll tell you that I spent 40 years in the advertising and billboard advertising business, and we spent millions for our various advertisers all over the country, and we can't keep up with things. If you drive down the 405 freeway right now and you drive past Carson and you see 60, 70-foot tall, rotating and literally edited advertisements, and not just for the car dealership under the sign, for the entire community of the 405 freeway. So I'm on a tangent, and I apologize to you guys because I know I'm making it a lot more complex than it needs to be, because we frankly just need to modify this system. But I think we need to understand what the motivation is, and I don't want to have us, the 5 or 6 of us, being used to sanction a noble outcome that the council is asking for, which is, can we get somebody to pay for the surveillance cameras to feed into Lost Hills? And can we stop some crime and make people feel safer? And then I have to watch all the ads, every 15 seconds are changing on the kiosks, whether they're flat screen, rotating cylindricals, and they're 6 feet tall or 12 feet tall, and then maybe the auto dealerships want to come back like you and I had to deal with when we had to deal with pole signs. Same story. I don't envy you, the role that we all have and that you're bringing to us in a very coherent way. I think this is very well prepared. But I'm going to give you my specifics so that, and maybe everybody else, if they haven't already, should do the same, so that we don't spend 5 hours trying to deal with Washburn's complaints or his ideas or experience, all right?
How are you going to communicate those additional?
I'm going to give my comments written down on both the input document and this actually well-done display packet that we've been watching on our screens. Everything I can think of is there, and I don't want to waste your time. And some of it's going to be repetitive with what you already know anyway, so I would just say that everybody should feed into Michael and Tom and everybody else.
Individually.
I'm sorry?
Individually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put my name on it and say, here.
So I'm just trying to think, one option that we could do moving forward, because again, we don't have a public hearing item in front of the commission. We're not here saying, please take action on this ordinance. This is drafted as a point of discussion so that there's something that the commission
Right.
has to look at and then provide feedback to staff. So we could accept written comments from each commissioner, put that into, for example, a table, and then put that on not the next meeting necessarily, but the future meeting. So that way all commissioners can see comments that were submitted by each individual commissioner. And then from there, we can have a discussion on what changes should be made, if any.
My primary concern is that this opens up the door to dealing with the Bill of Rights. Free speech,
Oh, the content you
Yeah.
mean.
peaceably assemble. We're trying to stop people carrying weapons into our shopping centers and schools and everything else, and it's all well motivated to make our people feel secure and safe, or at least have a chance to do that, to feel safe and secure. And how do you do it when you have to write a law? And most of what we do, in fact, is pay lip service to law enforcement and governance. We pay lip service to law enforcement, but the truth is we want security, safety, freedom to enjoy ourselves in beautiful spaces that we've worked real hard to create and prepare and our suppliers sustain, on and on.
So,
But, I mean, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth amendments are where we're playing. This is the arena we're working in right now.
so Dennis, I've taken notes of everyone's concern here, because when we go back to staff with drafting this, we want to make sure that we convey those concerns. I'll address what you said, Bob, about the discrimination. The city is allowed to set thresholds, benchmarks for businesses.
Of course, yeah.
So I don't foresee that being a problem, but anything that the commission, the concerns, I'm jotting it down to come back to you. It sounds as though you all just, some people may not be approving of it, but if the council wants it, we can talk about the parameters that the commission has the power to change and move forward from there. So like I've heard aesthetics about the flashing lights, and I've heard the size.
And you can't regulate aesthetics, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. You know, we
Well,
try, but we, you know,
Well, you could say, for example, Tom raised the point, can't we insist that these be framed as opposed to unframed? That's aesthetic.
Yeah.
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 As long as we make it measurable, for example, we could say that shall have not less than a 6-inch frame or something.
And the frame's color shall be consistent with the shopping center's basic colors, and that the lights are no greater candle power than X, and I don't think it's affecting the content by saying you can't change a vision other than every 3 minutes. That's not content oriented, I guess I would call it aesthetic, but.
we are having a conversation, right? So on page 6 of 30, there's a diagram, and there isn't a cylindrical kiosk, which is kind of what everybody thinks a kiosk is in Paris or in any European city. And I can tell you that Rick Caruso and Dave Williams, they said, we're going to make it look like it's, you know, the marketplace in Florence or in Rome or any place else, and there isn't a diagram in our existing for a cylindrical thing. I drew it in here, and I'm going to turn that in as well. If we spent more time, we could raise everything, and ultimately, I know that our staff can say, well, we can handle that. You know, we'll write it this way, or we'll not write, so that it'll be left open for, you know, the exceptions that will come up from the creativity of the people who own the property, or the people who buy ice cream cones and want to go and take a look at the latest shot of Kim Kardashian on a kiosk. And is that going to flash every 30 seconds or 10? And is it going to be a moving picture? Or is it going to rotate and glow at night until 10 o'clock or whenever? I mean, all that stuff is kind of handled where we are now, but when did we write this original document?
I believe 1998, and then it was updated again around 2010.
Were there cell phones in 1998?
No, and for what it's worth, the current sign ordinance prohibits
BlackBerry,
any form of digital signage, which is why this item is in front of the commission tonight, because no digital signs allowed. In fact, we, at the council meeting, brought up the concept of whether or not the council wanted the city to look into allowing other forms of digital signage. So for example, gas station, their signs, almost everywhere else in Southern California that you drive, the signs are digital so that they just hit a button and it changes the price sign. Here we don't allow that. So all the signs that are, the gas station signs are still just hand input signs that are removed on a daily basis. We raised that at the council level, and the council did not want to go down that route. They wanted it specific to digital kiosks. So
Well,
that's just,
because that's what we know. And how about holographic projections? Because Disney's doing that in Disneyland, and other people are doing holographic projections as well. And are there any life-threatening issues of holographic projections? I don't know. So, I mean, a lot of what we're doing here is we're trying to say, what's the world going to be like in, we say 2030, right, in the general plan. Well, I just came from a meeting last week where the mayor of Thousand Oaks says they're moving their city hall up to Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and their horizon for their planning is 2045. And we're justifying a lot of what we're doing in even tonight's packet on the basis that we're aiming for 2030. Well, we're there, you know, and AI has just changed the way everything's going to happen. It doesn't change the job that Michael has to do and Tom has to worry about, but it's still, it's a big problem if we take it in this large chunk of rewriting this ordinance to deal with the future.
So at this
And
stage.
I'm not complaining, because I mean, I think, as I said at the outset, we always do a better job than most folks. And you have, but I don't want to see us have the struggle that we went through with the story polls issue and the open questions of what's going to happen in the commons and also with, you know, next door property when, I know it's not on the agenda, but you know what? That's where the kiosks are. And that's where they're going to come and say, hey, I want a kiosk in my cafe on Commons Way or on Park Sorrento West, not east, but maybe on the east as well.
So again, at this stage, I'm certainly not hearing any level of consensus from the commission to go one direction or another. So we're not returning with any modifications to the draft that's been put in front of the commission tonight. It sounds like the best thing that we can do is get written comments from each commissioner, synthesize that into another document, and then come back and review those comments so we can get consensus on if there's changes based on those comments.
Well, I don't think we've
I'll
all.
bet you can cluster a lot of the things we're talking about. So we're talking about maybe 8 or 10 major issues
Right.
with all the subsets and everything else, instead of wandering in the weeds, you know, because we could do that all night.
Also, I haven't raised any questions yet, and I have a bunch.
And before you do,
comments too.
I'm really curious what the vice chair says, because everybody has
Yeah.
great comments right now in regards to Commissioner John referring to the tail wagging the dog. Remember, this is about security, and I guess the one piece of information we're missing is how much more revenue does a digital kiosk produce relative to a analog kiosk, a regular kiosk? Because if it's a substantial amount of money that makes it so that's the only way we can justify the live feed to the sheriff's office, maybe there's something to talk about. But there's also the option, again, Commissioner John brought up, of retrofitting, for example, the cylindrical kiosks in the commons, which I do like aesthetically. I think it's great. Again, what's as a percentage on average, and I know it might be hard to pin down, how much more will these digital advertisements bring in to the business owner relative to a regular kiosk with a sign, with a paper piece of cardboard that they can change out every day if they want? Heck, every 2 hours if somebody's on site with the property. I don't know. I would love to know that number as a percentage on average if we can pin it down, because maybe that would justify what we're talking about. But at the same time, I agree with Commissioner Washburn. It's a lot to take on, especially with the ever-changing landscape of digital advertisements and, you know, even holograms, like he said. So,
Matt, I'll tell you from the research that I've done, because initially we're looking at wayfinding. To answer that question, we have to know more about the selected kiosk, I believe, that the direction that the city wants to go with selecting the kiosk. So that'll be a hard question to answer without,
Well, I think if you ask Caruso, since you said they have them, you can find out.
as an example.
Oh.
But
That's
you'll
not
get-
saying
well,
that
you'll get some
everybody do that.
information.
I like to manage expectations here.
Oh.
And I cannot guarantee that we would be able to get that information. Caruso is under no obligation. I can reach out to Westfield, and they're under no obligation to disclose that information to us. But what we can do, we could look into RFPs that have been submitted to other jurisdictions, because there are public digital kiosks, wayfinding kiosks, that have been approved by other cities. Culver City's one of them. I think Santa Monica is another city. Those kiosks were installed by the city through a contract and a revenue sharing component to that contract in public spaces. So we can look into that to see what kind of revenue was generated, but
That's a much better idea.
there's always a lot of moving parts. I mean, the pier at Santa Monica Boulevard has a lot more people walking through it than any shopping center in this community. So even though they may have received a quote from one particular company to share revenue on $30 million a year, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the same level of revenue at any of these shopping centers.
And
But-
some of those people are actually walking kiosks themselves.
Yeah, and they may be actual digital
Go to
interactive
Sunset
kiosks.
Boulevard, you know?
So we can look into that. So any public record we can research. So like I said, Culver City, Santa Monica, we could see if there's documentation there. But I'd be very hesitant to get anything from a landlord.
Michael, you had. a bunch
Yes, I have a
stuff to
number
say.
of questions also, and I will try to put them in writing too. But the first question is, are there ordinances in other cities for this?
Yes.
So why don't we have samples, or can you get us samples?
We can include that at the
That's our
next
next
meeting.
step or two.
It's not
Oh,
the
okay.
Yeah, it's not.
I mean, instead of reinventing the wheel from scratch,
Well,
basically.
let me answer that. The reason why they're not samples, because those are on public property. I research for private situations. Those are on public property, the cities that Michael was suggesting. So we can bring those, but they're inapplicable to that degree.
Okay, but it's not a bad idea to have maybe a couple of public ones in certain places, like
Yeah.
Old Town. I'll talk about
And
that.
when I,
Okay,
Yeah.
and speaking, I was thinking of Old Town because I searched the municipal code and I could not find a definition for commercial shopping center, and that term is used over and over here. So I'm concerned about that because there's no definition. And Old Town might be a commercial shopping center. I mean, so I think somewhere you have to define it. You have to add a definition. I mean, I did a PDF search of it. It's not there.
We'll look it up, but
In
I'm
Title
pretty sure.
17, it's not there anyway.
The thing about the definitions is you can look for a definition of something, and what it really is under a different word, comma, something
No,
else.
I did a PDF search, so it looks for the word. So it's not there at least in 17. So I think it needs to be defined clearly, and I don't know what about Old Town. I don't know how big that is, if that, it just needs to be defined somehow. And then I agree with Commissioner Matt about the origin of this. I mean, where, the council members didn't just think of this themselves. Where did this come from? Is this the property owners trying to generate more revenue? And if so, then they should be paying for all the monitoring, as I mentioned. I'm concerned about this. Our city's apparently short of money, so why would we want to spend money? And by the way, we looked into having having cameras for my HOA and having them monitored, and it's not that expensive, and it's digital. It wasn't advertising, but we were going to strategically, and we're still considering it, place cameras just like they do around Calabasas Lake and have it monitored 24/7, and it's not that expensive. So I don't know why shopping center owners wouldn't just do that, if they really are concerned about security.
Michael, do you have paid personnel watching those feeds?
Yes.
Are
And it's
they in
not-
the parking booths or the entry booths?
No, they're not. Oh, yes, we were talking about where to put them, all along the perimeter of the whole HOA and in the
But
entry area.
Where's the monitor, though, and who's
A
doing the
camera.
monitoring? Okay,
And it's monitored off-site.
I see.
So I'm curious about that because I can't imagine, I don't know if it's the sheriff's office or the shopping center owners. I mean, I don't know what kind of revenue is coming in from these things, because if it's huge, then
Could be.
and then they should be paying, anyway. You told me the size of the kiosk has the commons, but 12 feet by 6 feet, that just seems enormous to me, and I'm not even sure how you measure elliptical or round kiosk surfaces. I think you've got a measurement problem, and it isn't in there really how you measure it. It just says, 40 square feet, or it says 6 feet by 12 feet, but what if it's elliptical or round, So I don't know. I mean, height, I guess you can measure, but not the surface area easily unless you are really good in algebra. But I don't know if that's what is meant by this. And I see you were holding, I see Jacqueline was holding tapes, but that didn't work for that kiosk. It doesn't, it's not really, you just have to define it. Because maybe
That
just.
was for dramatic effect.
No,
really,
but it was good, but maybe you just have to define it. Instead of looking at the curve, you just look at the farthest ends or something, but it just has to be defined better, because they will be round, and I hope they are. I hope they're not just slabs. But I looked at some of the manufacturer's sizes also, and there's nothing. I mean, the pre-made ones are up to like 5 feet, so these are going to be custom, I guess. And then the question is, you didn't put in your proposed ordinance how they're measured. I mean, are they measured not just if they're curved, but do they start from the ground like our regular signs? You know how our regular signs, like at I think it was the Audi dealership or something, because the post started at the ground, you started at the ground, not at the place where the text was. So you need to put in where it starts. You know, is it starting, I guess, at the ground, or is it's not just the screen area, I hope.
Yeah, we can modify that above grade.
Yeah, okay.
But, yeah, those are great points, all things that we would come back and have in that document, so that way we can get just a general consensus. Because I love the conversation about the height. We're not married to any specific height, we just threw that out there as a recommendation, and if
Yeah, okay.
the commission
I
thinks
feel
that
it's
it should be
too
lower,
tall,
then
yeah.
it'll be lower.
Yeah, I think that's too big, 12 feet. It's just, also, maybe that works at the Commons, but most of the other shopping centers, like the one you showed, I don't even think it has space for any kiosk, even though you have it every 75 feet.
Yeah.
It could impede the pedestrian flow, because it's a narrow pedestrian walkway.
There may be shopping centers, that's why I said also the smaller the shopping center gets, the more impractical it becomes to install
Right,
any of
like
these.
that one by the UPS, near the Jack in the Box. It's just a narrow cement strip, and if you put perpendicular kiosks, it's just going to block, as you say, accessible pedestrian traffic or anything, and you don't want it going the other way, because then it's just flashing neon billboards, basically. It's not neon anymore, but it's like Sunset Strip or Las Vegas to me. I don't like the ones with the changing images at all. I wish there was a way, I don't know if that's a controlling content, but changing images I don't like at all, even if it's digital. That's just too much flashing, and it's disruptive to me. I don't want it to look like we have mini billboards all over the place. I like the kiosks at the Commons. They're very stylish and so forth, but they're not flashing. There's no changing.
Anybody who is looking for, Pokemon loves to see the flashing changes, and their parents bring them to shopping centers to go look.
So you're stating just one advertisement stays on it the entire time?
Yeah, they can change it, like maybe, time limits, like every day or something, but not every 2 minutes, not moving pictures. This is very distracting, and it takes away the experience, I think, of just regular, Calabasas residents.
That would restrict revenue with the
That's,
advertising?
I want to know, we need to know what the revenue is. I mean, are we talking thousands of dollars every month for each kiosk? I have no idea. But I'm also troubled by the fact that they can advertise, I think as Dennis said, cars or popsicles, or what was the other one? Birkenstocks. I'm really troubled by that. I don't think that's appropriate, but I don't know how you control. So then you just can't do it at all, right?
I got to be honest, it just, using security as the impetus, it feels like this could be a Trojan horse.
Yeah, I think
to
that's,
make more money.
I think
I
that's
don't know.
sort of the theoretical inducement to this, but it's not believable. It is like a Trojan horse to me. I think there are other ways to do security. They should have security cameras already, and they shouldn't be 10 feet high or 8 feet high, where, as Dennis said, someone could spray them. I've seen ring videos of robberies in my neighborhood, from the golf course, and they immediately cover the cameras. That's the first thing they do. So as Dennis, or I mean, he obviously has criminal friends or something. So he knows that he knows the first thing you do is spray the camera. So that's kind of like, as Matt said, a Trojan horse. I don't believe it's real.
The one unique component to this type of signage is that the cameras can be integrated in such a way that they don't appear to be any cameras in the kiosk. So that would address that particular concern.
I guess we would have to see that. How believable is that?
Yeah, I don't have any specific design in front of me to look at, but that's what I've heard is possible. They could be set behind the actual screen even and see through the screen, and therefore you've got cameras that are not noticeable as cameras
that would
around
be better.
the center.
That would be better, but I guess we need to see that.
And that could be design criteria, is that any camera that's associated is built into it in an inconspicuous manner.
Okay, I do tend to think though that's what I was asking. Where is this coming from? Who's driving this? And it seems to me it's not about safety. That's just a second. That's a way to fool us in a way. So because they could screen security cameras too, so nobody could see them. So anyway, that's just my thought.
Can I ask a question about the staff experience? Are GoPro cameras or those kinds of devices or drone cameras and those kinds of devices being considered in the process of providing for the security and safety and the feed to the sheriff's department and so forth? Last night, if you watch the main news, and they caught some guy breaking into a car, they showed them the drone is literally over him, and the police were vectored right to the guy. They hauled him away. And that can happen in the parking lot of the Commons or the Summit or any place else right now. And
Without kiosk signs.
we probably have some rules and regs regarding airborne and or movable video cameras like the GoPro.
Yeah, it's beyond the scope of our department. We don't regulate that in Title 17. There may be other provisions in the municipal code that do regulate drones.
Where else is it regulated?
I could not tell you. I don't have
Okay.
that information.
Well, I
in
mean,
front of me.
that's going to pop up in this discussion next time because it's a thing. It's happening.
I do remember drones are regulated, and I remember seeing that, and I think that needs to be addressed because what Dennis said
Well,
is
we have
is a
drones
good
that
is a good
we deploy
point.
at special events, and our guys are doing this. The image on our screens right now, that image on that screen for the public to see, that was taken with a city drone, and it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I don't know if the city has regulations specific to drones or if there are
HOA.
state or federal regulations with regards to drones. I know the few people at the city that do operate drones have some sort of special license to do so.
We're having in our neighborhoods, they come over and hover over the pools and check you out in your bikini as you're swimming, So, I mean, until they can run away with their drone. And you can't figure out how to regulate a thing like that anyway. And that's going to be in our future.
Lovely.
I don't envy the task of trying to consolidate, but, it's probably going to be in big chunks like we're talking about. And maybe only in those areas where we can actually have an impact by writing a law as opposed to trying to regulate behavior or aesthetics.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one question of staff?
Of course.
Do we have any sense of the interest level of any landlords in digital kiosks? Have businesses been coming or landlords been coming and saying, why, darn it, Calabasas, why can't we do this?
We don't have a parade of people saying, why can't we do this? We have heard from one for sure asking, why can't we do this?
One?
And
So-
was that one saying, this is the hottest new way to advertise and we ought to do this, or was it
Well,
more
it's
general?
It's pointing out that that's the evolution, let's put
I
it
see.
that way. It's sort of like what Michael was saying about the gas price signs. I mean, I think it's inevitable. It's not a matter of whether we're going to allow digital there. Sooner or later, the state's probably going to mandate it because it just doesn't make sense to do it except that way. The prices change so frequently. The
reason I
fact
asked-
is, media, static forms of media out in the public realm, you just won't see it anymore. It just isn't going to happen. Where it is viewed as a static image, is still going to be a dynamic image. You just won't perceive it. And that's where this is going.
I asked the question because I'd hate to see the staff and the council and the commission spend God knows how many hours doing this and passing this, and then have very few shopping centers that actually want to put up 1 or 2 or 3 or 10. I mean, it just again, it's, I had the tail and the dog, I'll use the cart and the horse, right? Is this really going to be a meaningful change? I think it's a clever idea, and I totally agree with Dennis and others that staff has done a remarkable job at taking a clever idea from the council and actually putting words to it. So I do appreciate that.
I think you make an excellent point about property owner interest, and I think one of the things we need to do is do some outreach and find out just how much interest there would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, where did this come from? Where did the council members hear this?
I think you'd have to hear from a council member because they
I
didn't
mean-
tell me.
Get them in here.
I'm just curious, is it from one property owner contacting them, or are there other cities considering this?
Well, other cities have adopted, like we said, other forms of digital signage. So,
But usually just for themselves, not for,
that was for the city to install it in a public space, yes.
and again, I think that's not a bad idea, that we have a public kind of sign, like in Old Town or someplace, advertising public Calabasas events or school events or something like that.
That's a whole other process, which wouldn't even technically require a change to our municipal code. The city council can authorize that through an RFP process and have a sign installed in the right-of-way of
Oh, I
city
see.
property.
I don't think that's a bad idea, by the way.
That could be a recommendation back to the council too at the end of all of this.
In a couple of places around the city, school events, city events, whatever.
Oh, Dennis, answer to your question about the drones is under Title 9, Chapter 9. Title 9, Public Peace and Welfare, and it's regulated federally.
Federally. So it's probably a license issue or something.
I think all this, the wariness, if I may use that word, and at least curiosity, is stemming from the fact that I don't really like this idea of, again, little mini billboards that are digital everywhere. I mean, they can have regular, good old-fashioned cardboard billboards, and again, I'm just curious about the revenue, but regardless of how much more revenue on average a digital kiosk generates relative to a non-digital, I think that's going to contribute more to our suspicion and our wariness. Again, to use security as the guise, as the catalyst for this, it's starting to feel a little insincere. And whether we cover the camera or don't cover the camera, I mean, well, if we cover the camera up and you can't see it, it's not really going to deter crime, so to speak. I don't know. I just feel like the recommendation overall, the umbrella, is we don't like them, if I may be so bold.
And that is at the discretion of the commission. So the council had a future agenda item placed on their agenda. There was a brief discussion on June 19th, which anyone can go back and look at that June 19th meeting to see what was discussed at council and the direction that was given to staff. Part of the process of an ordinance is to get a recommendation from the planning commission. And if the planning commission, ultimately, their recommendation is to not approve the ordinance, then that would move forward to the council.
And they could approve one or not, I suppose.
And they can make a choice from there. They can disagree with changes that were made to the proposed ordinance and say, we actually like 20 feet and want to approve 20 feet. But this is the process, and we brought this forward just as a way to begin that discussion, solicit feedback, and then we will move forward with the public hearing because that is what we were directed to do. But it is entirely up to the commission to form their recommendation to the council.
So we're going to have a public hearing, and then we could, again, say we're not in favor of this, and that's, but I think you have a lot of concerns up here. You've heard a lot of concerns about this.
Yeah, and so I'm not planning on scheduling a public hearing until we have at least one more meeting with the commission, taking the feedback that we get in writing, and then coming back so we can get actual direction. And if it means direction on individual suggestions, right? If the suggestion is that the height should be no more than 10 feet, I want to make sure that we have a consensus from the commission that that's the change that should be made to the ordinance. And ultimately, we could do all of that, and frankly, at the end of that, the commission can still say we do not recommend approval of this ordinance. Take that action, and then we will move it on to council.
And we also need, I think all of us need more information.
Yeah, and we will answer as many questions as we can. Again, mindful
Okay.
there are some questions that we may not be able to answer, but we'll do our best.
And even if you can't get cooperation from certain landlords, staff might be able to just simply get pictures of what some of these look like. If some shopping center has digital kiosks, let's see what some look like.
I have that in the notes to do.
Thank you.
I think there's some in Paris. I'm going to ask for a opportunity to go check that
Paris,
out.
California?
Take
No,
me-
no,
take
no.
me out there.
I know Matt will go.
Clarity, I was saying Title IX of the Calabasas Code. Y'all know that, right?
Okay.
I was saying Title IX of the Calabasas Municipal Code is where drones mentioned, but they mimic the federal regulations.
Oh, I see.
Okay,
So want to make sure that was clear.
okay.
Any more comments, or can we just move on to?
Sounds like we have direction from the commission, and I
Oh.
want to thank you for that.
Thank you for
Well-
the work you put into this.
Yeah, if we can, I would like to identify is there a specific date we want this to come back? Next meeting, the following meeting,
Next year?
and next year? And then put some parameters on when we can expect written comments from the commission, because I don't want to leave that open-ended either. So again, we can say, do we want to bring this back in, not the next meeting, but the meeting after that? And then give the commission 2 weeks from tonight to submit comments to staff?
That
I don't
sounds
think that
plausible.
we're questioning the urgency of this, because if we don't do something now, something bad is going to happen to all of us. I mean, that's just, and that's the sense at the council.
Oh.
And we have a few opportunities, because the sheriff's department has in fact allowed the captain to set up the monitoring station, and they figured out using, interestingly enough, generative AI to figure out how they can get all of the Ring doorbell feeds into that place. And the purpose is to monitor as much of the, the unwholesome activity, I'll use it that way, and not how people react when they're dropping their ice cream cone in front of a kiosk here, so.
Well, let me put it a different way. We don't have to choose a date for this to come back, but I would like to at least put a deadline for comments to be submitted to staff. If 2 weeks is reasonable,
Can I
Can
is that
suggest
okay
we
for
do it
everybody?
Before back to school, because that's a lot of what's driving this too. Back to school is what, August 16th, or when?
Well, 2 weeks would be before that.
2 weeks is
so
the,
Or it could be later. I
2
mean, it
weeks,
might
yeah,
even
would
be
be
after
the
Labor
first.
Day.
yeah, the first, August 1st. Comments,
Oh,
written
okay.
comments.
yeah,
That's-
comments back to staff by August 1st.
Who do they go to? Tom?
To Tom, me, and Rachel.
Okay.
And then,
Or just one of you is enough? and-
yeah, we'll make sure it gets around.
Sure.
And then we won't choose a date now. We'll take all the comments, and then we'll bring this back at a later
And try to
meeting.
get the answers, information, because
Yep.
okay, that may take you a while.
So we don't
It'll
need to
take a
give-
little while.
We don't need to give further direction at this point?
No, we're going to just
I agree.
submit comments by August 1, and then they'll come back. So then we're on to director's report. Oh, again, thank you for all the work you've done. You've obviously done a tremendous amount of work, and I think we all appreciate that. Just wonder why. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you.
Director's report.
Nothing of significance. We will come back to the next meeting on August 1st, as we have the resolution from tonight's meeting. We may have a couple of other projects, so there's some single-family homes under consideration. It's possible Calabasas, for example, may be ready, but we'll send out hearing notices for that. Again, I do want to remind the commission that August 14th is the first city council meeting after their break, so they've been on break for July. And for the August 14th meeting, we do have the West Village settlement project scheduled for that agenda.
I have one more question. In fact, I want to direct it to our attorney, and that is, if you don't mind.
No, of course not.
Are we in a position to encourage existing or future developers to build these kinds of systems that we're coming to grips with in their project areas? Not that I want to say every development should have a kiosk in it, but the whole purpose of the kiosk enablement that we're talking about is in order to get video surveillance, essentially, that helps people feel better about their public safety and their, crime stopping and everything else. So do we have the ability at this point to add that to the conditions of approval of projects on some level, whether it's 30 units plus or, 120 units of project area, whatever?
I mean, we could always recommend things, but as a condition, I want to check and make sure that the code, like law, allows that. But off the top of my head, if you want to put a condition in about surveillance or having the property that kind of restrict, I'm going to listen to my lawyer spidey sense, and I'll get back to you to answer you.
We obviously spent a lot of time, dealing with the approval and ultimate governance of 119 apartments being built and introducing living spaces in mixed-use space, that everybody perceived was going to be long-term movie house and shops and restaurants, and let's have more restaurants as well. And of course, we had all kinds of conditions. So if that becomes a part of the council's direction to all of us, including obviously being reviewed here at the commission, it would be good to know if there is a capability that we have to deal with those issues from a legal and or code development standpoint, or how about enforcement of that as well? I mean, all that stuff is going to be really tricky, as will this, from a code enforcement standpoint.
Okay. Understood.
Thank you.
Anything else, Michael? Oh, then planning commissioners, any reports?
When's
No?
our next meeting?
I don't know.
Sorry, say that again?
Next meeting would be,
Oh, August 1st.
okay,
5th? Did I hear 5th?
First.
Oh, 1st, okay, thank you.
then unless there's anything, does anybody want anything else to say, or are we adjourned?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor? Yes. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much.